Good morning, friends. Welcome back to the channel. I'm the GM Philosopher. Today we're talking about adventure hooks. And this is really going to be my ultimate guide to adventure hooks. I'm going to tell you how I managed to make them pretty awesome in my campaigns, how I get my players involved, how to make the hooks really stick and be realistic and immersive. You're not going to want to miss this. Let's dive into it. A lot of GMs have one big problem with adventure hooks. Can you guess what it is? They try too hard to plan them out. Now, this might sound ironic, this might sound counterintuitive, but hear me out. One of the most sought after features of adventure hooks for player characters is that they are immersive, they're believable. And I think that every GM knows this. Speaking of that, if you like talking to other GMs about this kind of stuff, you should join the GM Philosophy Discord. There's over 400 of us at this point, all game masters talking about cool D&D and TTRPG stuff. So links in the description, you should join us. It's pretty cool. But here's what GMs often don't think about. What player characters care even more about than that is curiosity, discovery, the unexplained. Plot hooks give player characters something to discover, something new, something interesting. But one of the most important features of plot hooks that a lot of GMs honestly don't think about when they're planning them out is the feature of choice. In other words, the greatest plot hooks are the ones the player characters choose on their own. They choose them because they're interesting. They choose them because they want to pursue those plot hooks, not just because the GM planned them out. Hence, we come to our railroading and sandbox question. How much of your campaign should you actually have planned versus how much should be left open to the players and, dare I say it, improvised? When we start delving into these questions, we start delving into the true essence of the magic of successful plot hooks. Let's untangle this for a moment. So here's what happens first. Players begin adventure. They choose to do some stuff. They go here, or they do this, or they talk to this person. I'm describing the surroundings. Eventually, a plot hook will open up in front of them. This plot hook may come from my instincts. I may go with my gut. I may have an idea about something to throw in front of them. They may or may not bite on it. That's okay. This is player choice. If I'm having trouble coming up with a plot hook, like off the cuff, I may random roll it on something like my ebook, the Ultimate Plot Randomizer. You can download a copy of this for free when you sign up for my email list. Link is in the description. Or if I want to go a lot deeper, I may use my Ultimate Adventure Generator. This is an ebook you can purchase off my ebook store for $5.99. Basically lets you random roll on nearly any aspect of adventure generation, 163 random roll tables, 310 print-friendly pages. There's literally a random table in here for just about any type of adventure creation, and I'll use this to flesh out plot hooks if I'm not quite sure where I want them to go. Now, by their nature, plot hooks are going to have three different parts. There's going to be a hook, there's going to be some kind of complication or conflict, and there's going to be a climax or a resolution. This is kind of the thing that the plot hook is trying to accomplish. For example, the player characters might hear a little girl talking to one of the business stall owners, basically saying how her orphanage headmistress beats her relentlessly. This is the hook. This is the thing that would entice the player characters to get involved. The complication and resolutions of the plot arc will emerge if the players embark on it. But in order for the players to embark on it, first they need to get hooked. You need to hook them in. And the part of the hook that is interesting and artistic and creative for game masters is basically this question, or the answer to this question. How can I design my plot arcs so that they really do hook my players, get them interested? How do I make my players want to pursue my plot arcs without me needing to try to railroad anything, so that there's some kind of story that the players will actually choose? And I have found that there are a few different methods for this, and the best plot hooks are ones that incorporate all of these methods. Number one, there needs to be something mysterious, a curiosity, something to discover. You hint at the mystery. You hint at, there's something hidden behind this door, or something hidden behind the situation. If we pursue it, we will discover the mystery. So tempting players with a bit of mystery is one really good tactic. The next is emotional connection, emotional emotional impact, something that evokes real human emotion. My example of the little girl getting beaten by the headmistress is one of these. It evokes a bit of emotion. It might evoke some anger or righteous retribution type, vengeance type feelings on the part of the players. They might think, this is wrong. We can't let this go on. And this will entice them to want to get involved in the arc. So emotional impact, a very powerful way to hook players into adventure arcs. And the third is some kind of residual danger. So sometimes characters unknowingly, unwittingly get themselves into situations where danger approaches them, right? Despite their best efforts. So maybe they go into a tavern and they start hanging out and a person kind of says, hey, you shouldn't be here. You and your kind, you need to leave. And maybe they talk back, or maybe they argue a bit, or maybe they don't leave. It actually doesn't need to be that complicated or even that complex, but this could inspire the wrath of a local crime lord who then thinks to themselves, oh, these people are going to talk back to my lieutenant at the bar. There you got another thing coming. And then before you know it, this crime lord sends a whole group of anti-heroes to basically try to beat up, rough up these adventurers. And if the adventurers win that fight, now they have the crime lord's undivided attention and he's pursuing them. Okay, so this is an example of danger being thrust upon the party almost via circumstances they can't control. Now, you have to be a little careful with this one. This one can delve into railroady territory. It can also be a real pain and annoyance for the characters. And the line of choice becomes much more blurry with this option. So what you really want to do is you kind of want to talk about this one in terms of giving the players more information and giving them kind of an out so they can opt out of the adventure. And I usually do this in the following manner. There will be the very clear cut, if you do not comply with us, we're going to pursue you and make your lives difficult. Danger will come after you, basically. Or there's this out. It's or you know what? You can pay us 50 gold. We'll forget all about it, right? So it's on one hand, there's their pride. And if they cared all about that, that might entice them to follow the arc. They might be no, we're not going to pay. We're going to fight you, or whatever the case. Whereas if they really want out of the arc, they can kind of take a semi-easy step to get out of the arc. And basically that will show you, oh, well, they don't really care about the pride part. They don't really care about that part. They just want out of this part of the story. And so they pay a little bit of something, make a little sacrifice, and they get out of the arc. That's my favorite way to work that one. And these are the three things that I think make plot hooks the best. These are the best ways to entice players into it. And there are other ways to do it. In the danger advancing one, you can have the thrill of one-upmanship. They get a challenge from these other fighters. And it's basically are you going to meet our challenge, or are you afraid? Right. So there's taunting, that kind of thing. So you can play into, leaning toward hooking them in emotionally in that sense. You can have the promise of curiosity and discovery in this setting too. The leader might be this person who wears a helmet or a mask, and they see that they're not a human. What are they? So there's a curiosity. It's we want to find out who this person is. So maybe you get all three of those factors tied into it. Those are the very best hooking plot hooks, the ones that kind of use all three of those elements to really hook the player. Now, eventually the conflict or the complication will emerge. Going back to the headmistress of the orphanage who is beating the child, she is a charge of this orphanage, and of course, unless someone pays a hefty sum of coin, they will refuse to release her, which leaves the player characters in a bit of a moral quandary. Should they pay the money to get the child out? Should they leave her there so that she continues to get beat by the headmistress? Or should they plot some kind of escape or do something heroic, etc.? And then of course we have the climax of the resolution, where the plot arc is eventually headed. Obviously, where this plot hook wants to go is it wants to see the child freed from the oppressive orphanage where she's getting beat all the time. Now, whether or not any of this will come to pass is really up to the player characters, because they're the ones who drive the narrative. As game masters, we can put these plot hooks in front of player characters, and they are going to play out a certain kind of way without their help, probably. Player characters do, however, have the power to jump in and affect change. This is when the best plot hooks take shape, when player characters choose to act upon them, and then you let the consequences fall as they may based on player choice. Now, plot hooks are also going to fall somewhere on a spectrum of simple and complicated. There are upsides and downsides to both types, but as a general rule, the simpler the plot hook, the better it's going to be for immersion and the more streamlined your planning process and improvisation process is going to be. Complex plot hooks bring some challenges of their own in the sense that tracking continuity while improvising can be a big challenge, but the best result in a campaign or a long-term adventure is to have, roughly 75% of your plot hooks be simple and then roughly 25% of them be complex. I will either use my instincts and just roll with the punches to improvise simpler plot hooks. For more complex plot hooks, I will probably be thinking about them days in advance. I'll probably write out a very basic outline of how I want them to be. For very simple plot hooks, I may use my ultimate plot randomizer to help me kind of like improvise those. But for more complex plot hooks where there are multiple points in a story and multiple characters and multiple angles of motivation, I will use something like my ultimate adventure generator because it can just go so much more in depth with so many more tables. Now, when I say simple plot hooks, here's what I mean. I mean, orphanage girl gets overheard saying that her headmistress beats her. The party hears it. Do they bite? Do they not? This is a relatively simple thing. There are going to be more levels of complication when they reach the orphanage, probably. For example, they might find out there are some minor security measures. They may find out that the headmistress is overall just a jerk. She has trauma from her past. She takes it out on the students. Maybe there's even like a priest who oversees it. Maybe he does or doesn't know about what's going on. But really, overall, the biggest point of contention, honestly, is going to be the coin spent to adopt the girl. And then there may or may not be like a revenge element, but it's just not that complicated of a plot arc. With that being said, don't be dissuaded by the idea of a simple plot arc. Player characters getting involved always make things more complicated, and it always takes longer to resolve than you would think. Sometimes a simple plot hook is the best way to transition into a pretty awesome adventure arc. It's also true that once you get into a simple plot arc, you may choose to add levels or layers of complexity to it using improvisation. You might get some inspiration. You might get some great ideas. Think to yourself, you know what? At first, I thought this was just a case of a headmistress beating these orphans, and then there was going to be the question of whether the party was going to rescue this girl. But then once they get into it, maybe you think to yourself, you know what, I'm getting this idea. I want to drop some clues. I want this to be a bigger thing. And that can lead us to more complex plot arcs. An example of how this plot arc might be made more complex, or how you could even plan it from the beginning to be a more complex plot arc, is this. In investigating the orphanage and the headmistress and everything going on, it turns out that this is not a simple case of a headmistress taking her frustrations out on the orphans. It is actually a dragon-born child assassin creation program where the children are basically being assimilated and prepared by the administration of the orphanage to be child assassins, and then they are snuck out the back door via wagons basically as they reach a certain age, and the Dragonborn take them, they smuggle them out of the country, and they basically train them up to be humanoid assassins. And so this is a very dark and sort of like added layer of complexity here. Now we have a whole underground smuggling operation. We have Dragonborn, basically agents working in the country. We have this headmistress who's coordinating with them, and there's probably deeper layers of it too. There might even be other students who are like sleeper agents who are basically on the lookout. Maybe this little girl doesn't quite understand the full reality of what she's in for, so to her it seems simple, but once the player characters start poking around, they start finding evidence of a much bigger situation. And so that's how you can kind of add layers of complexity, and you could actually keep adding layers of complexity onto it. You could come to find that not only is the orphanage a sort of plant that's cooperating with an underground dragonborn force, but you could also find that they also cooperate with several local churches. You could even find out that several of the local priests are actually dragonborns who are using disguised self to make themselves appear humanoid, and they are using the church as a means of basically filtering orphans from the local village or city into this orphanage to fuel it and thus fuel their efforts to recruit child assassins. Now, I will offer a quick word of warning. It is very tempting to turn simple plot arcs into complex plot arcs, and in fact, it's very tempting to continue to make plot arcs more complex. The reason this is tempting is because it's super fun to give players clues, it's super fun to have them discover new things, it's super fun to have them uncover deeper levels of sophistication in your plots. But here's the problem with this. As you grow the plot arc in sophistication, continuity becomes harder to track. And unless you keep very meticulous notes or you have a photographic memory, it might be difficult to actually remember what you were doing from one session to the next, especially if you only play once a week, and especially if this plot arc is going to span multiple sessions. In my experience, it's generally a safer bet to keep plot arcs a little bit simpler and to try to make them resolvable in a session or two as sort of a limited plot arc adventure, and then string adventures together and kind of just bring in new plot arcs until you get really comfortable with a plot arc growing in sophistication to where you can track it and keep track of the continuity. Continuity can be a real big deal. It can be very easy to forget details, but have your players remember them. So a player might bring up a clue you introduced 2 sessions ago, and then you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. And you have since taken it in a whole new direction where that clue doesn't really fit. This is one of the problems that can come from improvising more complex plot arcs. This is why it can make sense to actually plan out more sophisticated plot arcs on paper first. But here's the problem. Your player characters may not choose to bite on that plot arc. And once you get into it, you may even decide to take it a different direction because your instincts are telling you to, because you're just not feeling the way you laid it out before. This happens all the time. And don't be surprised if it happens to you, because it's super, super common. So I tend to find that the best way to lay out plot arcs is like this. Keep them pretty simple. And if you're going to add layers of complexity, add them in bullet point format. Very, very simple, so that you can leave a lot of room for improvisation and only allow yourself to make it so complicated. Really try to how can I say this? Really try to limit yourself in how complex you make specific plot arcs as you're venturing and improvising and letting players choose things, because the simpler you keep it and the higher the quality of those simple plot arcs is going to be better for continuity, and it's going to feel more immersive. There's going to be less margin for error with your player characters. When I say increase the quality, I mean you can make simple plot arcs kind of boring and blah, or you can make simple plot arcs really incredible if you really beef up things like the immersive nature of the NPCs. If you put really interesting characters in the plot arc, if you put really interesting items or clues, like if you're only going to have a few clues, make those clues really interesting, or add a puzzle that's really interesting. Basically, increasing the quality of the individual parts will make the value of the sum of those parts way better for a simple arc than a complex arc would be, with the potential for disaster with continuity errors and such. With that being said, and I'm not trying to make this more complicated, don't necessarily be super afraid of continuity errors either. If you're feeling a more complex arc and you want to add some complexity and your gut is telling you make it more complex, then it might be the right thing to do. And sometimes you're going to have continuity errors. Sometimes your players will forget about them if you just don't bring them up again. But sometimes you can also find a new way to make that clue fit. Or sometimes that clue can lead to a whole different plot arc adventure. And it turns out that it was just a coincidence that they found it. So there are a lot of ways to kind of mess with that. But at the end of the day, I think following your instincts, going with your gut, being willing to let players choose their adventures, and then being super willing to let their actions dictate what goes on with the plot arc next, this is going to be the best way to play things out. Always treat player choice with the highest level of respect, and then make sure that you remember you are telling the story of the player characters, all of you together. Your plot arc isn't the story. Your plot arc is a feature of the story of these characters. And if you keep this in mind and keep it kind of your north pointing compass as you adventure, you're going to find that your adventures are going to appeal to your players way more, because that's what players want. They want to tell the stories of their characters. So don't take that spotlight away from them and put it on your plot arc. Let your plot arc be a feature of this incredible story of these adventurers, and you really cannot go wrong. There is one more thing I want to talk about quick, and that is our awesome Ko-Fi members. Thank you so much for our Ko-Fi community supporters. It is through their support that we're able to make these awesome videos, run the awesome GM Philosophy Discord, and manage a pretty awesome email mailing list every week. Big shout out especially to Craig, our first gold level supporter. Thank you so much, Craig, for supporting the channel, and thank you to all the rest of you awesome Ko-Fi members who support GM Philosophy and all the awesome work we do here for Game Masters. If you would like to join the GM Philosophy Ko-Fi community membership program, which gets you free access to our entire ebook library, well, link to that is in the description. You should check it out. It's pretty awesome. And that, my friends, is going to be a wrap. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm here every single day creating videos about the best game in the world, D&D. Roll some D100s for me at your next game, and I will see you awesome people on the next one.